when we hate something, we tend to not take very good care of it, right? So when I am in a constant battle with my body, in a constant battle with the scale, it is very likely that I will not be taking good care of my body.
Hey guys, and welcome back to It's Pretty Simple, a podcast where we break down fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle in a way that actually makes sense. There's no fluff, no gimmicks, just practical advice that's actually going to help you in your journey. On today's episode, I have a guest with me. I have Barbara. Barbara is a nutritionist and a body image coach. Hi, Barbara. Welcome to the show.
Hi, so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What led you to become both a nutritionist and a body image coach?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for starting with this question because I think it is really important. And I think similar to a lot of the coaches, the reason I ended up in this industry is sort of a personal journey. So now, quite a few years ago, I was stuck in never feeling good enough, doing more and trying to achieve that perfect body through different things, right? I think my journey is similar to a lot of women where you try all the diets and all the different hacks only to realize that none of them actually lead you to feel confident and great in your body. And that's sort of what happened. I went through a few years of different strategies. And then I set myself a goal of getting a six pack because I really believed that this was the missing piece. That once I have that, I will feel confident when I put my bikini on. I'll go to the beach and I'll just be the happiest on that beach. And I worked with a personal trainer. I apparently, in his words, became the leanest client he's ever had. And that last day of working with him, I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, oh, but I still don't feel any different. So it was then when I realized, right, the problem is not my physical body. I need to work on what's going on emotionally and what's going on in my head. And yeah, during that time, I then started with getting a nutritional qualification. And because I wanted to, I guess, get all the answers, I started working myself with a body image coach. And that's what then led me down this route. And now I help women just like I was helped once find their confidence, stop constantly obsessing over food and how their bodies look so that they can actually create more space in their lives to live a thriving life and prioritize those things that really matter the most to them.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I mean, having a personal story like that, it just makes you realize like how many, you took the approach to then go learn about it and go deep dive into it. But so many people are in that position. I think I was one of them as well. Like my goal was get a six pack, and that was the pure focus. I don't know. I think it was the time as well, maybe like 10 years ago or something. That was what considered you good looking or hot or having the perfect body. I chased it for a long time until like just one day I woke up and I said, you know what? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm constantly hungry. Like, do I really want it? It was just, I just want to look really good again for the bikini. But yeah, then I just realized it's really not worth it. It's not something I want to do, and that I can still achieve my best fitness physique that will work for my body type and my body by just doing, repeating the same old things over and over again without doing anything crazy and extreme. Like I remember finding myself once doing the carnivore diet. I put myself on it, like how ridiculous. And then like 4 days in, I find myself hiding in the bathroom eating chocolate. Like who am I hiding from? Who am I hiding from? Myself. So yeah, when things like that happen, you start to realize like this shit's not worth it at all.
No, totally, totally. And I remember specifically that time was probably the time in my life where I was the least healthy. Not only, physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. The work that goes into that, the obsession, the constant tracking, the thinking it takes away from all other areas of your life. And yes, at the time I was telling myself, well, all these other things are not that important to me anyway, because we try to convince ourselves that
Yeah.
we don't care about having friends and having a healthy relationship, right? Because what we want is that six pack, because when we get there, that's when all the rest will fall in place.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't really work that way.
No, it doesn't. That's why there's always a deeper why. Like when I connect with my clients, and if anyone comes to me with a specific body goal, I always tell them that they need to dig deeper before we can actually start working together, because even if they achieve it, they're never going to be satisfied anyway. So there's something else that they need to dive down, dive deep into and look at. And then I also say, we're not athletes. Like, we're not professional athletes. Me, my clients, like, we don't need to be doing that. And also, professional athletes, they work in seasons, right? So they do this intense stuff, tracking all this stuff, crazy workouts and everything, and then they take an off season. So there is that balance. It's pretty interesting because I also find that a lot of coaches have body dysmorphia, and this obviously directly relates to body dysmorphia, right? And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that it's not just regular people, but also people on social media who are coaches, who are obsessed, who have body dysmorphia, but people don't see it because nobody talks about it. I'm going to jump into a couple of questions when it comes down to food and your body. What do you define as a healthy relationship with food and your body? How would you define it?
So I think when we look at defining a healthy relationship with food and our bodies, it is going to be slightly different for each individual. However, overall, we are looking for a relationship that enhances our lives, that doesn't take away from our lives, where we are able to consistently make healthful choices, where we're also able to have flexibility with that. And most importantly, I think that's that's the main point, that we're not constantly in our head about the food we're eating or the way our body looks, where these are just things that are a part of our lives, but they are a small part of our lives. And we have all other things going on for us that define us as an individual, so that food and body are not the only things that we have going for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when people start to focus too much on food, they really lose out on a lot of other things in life, because that becomes everything about. That's just what it is. It's all about taking their food with them, not or canceling plans with friends, or not having a meal with their family and things like that. And it's quite sad, because actually I think it puts you in a worse mental state.
I think way too often we look at our health simply from the physical, right? But our health is not only that. If we are really talking about flourishing health, we also need to consider our mental health, our social health, all other things that make our lives, that make our well-being, thriving, let's say. So yes, nutrition, physical activity, of course, that is part of feeling our best. There's no denying it. It's a very important part, in fact. But we can't ignore everything else.
Yeah. When you say that, it's true, because I think people do take away from what health really means. Like if you see somebody who's slightly overweight maybe, but they are very physically able, and they're able to run marathons or whatever, people will still look at them and say one unhealthy person, but they have no idea. Maybe their VO2 max is really, really high. They've got great energy. Maybe they've got really high muscle mass. So yeah, the definition of health, although I think that it's spreading a lot more now, at least from what I see. But then, the algorithm on social media is made for what you look at. So I don't know what somebody else would be looking at. But I just feel like I see that more and more people are understanding that health is more than just your body. But, if I go into one of my clients' phones and look at that, I don't know if I'm going to see the same thing on their algorithm.
Yeah,
So social
that's
media doesn't
interesting. And
help.
I think no, it really doesn't. And I think that's a really important point, right? We might rationally understand that health is more than our physical body, but if our behaviors are not aligned with that, we're still not really going to feel that our health is more than just physical health, that our life is more than just our physical body. So it's that kind of closing that gap from what we know theoretically and rationally, and to what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and this comes in with the next question I want to ask you. So I work with mostly women in their 30s, so I'm going to kind of angle this towards that. So a lot of women in their 30s, especially because they're coming to this age where a lot of people may have had a baby or two. Things are changing for them. They women in their 30s, well, not everyone has started training early. Like me myself, I started training when I was 23. And then you've got a lot of women who are in their 30s now who probably started training in their late 20s as well. And they're seeing a shift in their body from in their 20s when they were doing nothing to now their 30s. They're married, they've got kids, probably, a little bit of a stressful job, whatever it is. So there's a lot of women who are stuck in between wanting to feel healthier because they feel like they lack energy and just they like confidence, energy, and just feeling good all the time, but they're stuck in between wanting the healthier and the pressure to look a certain way. So how would you help somebody navigate that?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think it comes down to how we relate to our bodies. So it comes down to our body image. And a lot of people think that improving our body image, working on our body image, means letting ourselves go. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because when we work on our body image and when we develop that positive body image, that's when we are consistently making healthier choices. That's when we are consistently moving our bodies because it makes us feel great, because in the process, we have found a way of moving our body that feels nice and that we enjoy. So it comes from shifting the mindset from doing things because we think we have to do them, because the world has told us that we need to do hours of cardio, and starting to learn to trust ourselves more again without all that outside noise that is not really helping.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel a lot of people are also very dishonest with themselves. So with what you said, people need to shut off the outside noise and start focusing on them. But there are people that are still dishonest with themselves in this aspect. And then this is where I think it comes down to people starting to have a bad relationship with food. So, maybe they have disordered eating, but they're not binge eating or they're not restricting like drastically or anything, but they are lying to themselves about not wanting to achieve a certain body and just be healthy. So how can somebody navigate something like that? How would they know? Because I feel a lot of people don't even know that they have borderline eating disorder.
Yeah, so I think we need to understand that our eating behaviors, we have them on a spectrum, right? So in the middle, let's say we have healthy relationship with food, healthy behaviors. We then have eating disorders on the far end, and then we have disordered eating, right? So it's important to understand that what we are gonna be talking about here are not eating disorders. So if someone is struggling with that, even I have had people come to me in the past to work with me, but that would be out of my scope of practice. So they need to obviously have professional helping and supporting them. But when we're talking about disordered eating behaviors, or simply behaviors that don't fall into that eating disorder category, but are negatively affecting our quality of life, that's when we or I can support. So what the question I would ask as a potential listener that might be struggling with something like that is, are my eating and movement, let's say, because a lot of people also struggle with their relationship with exercise. So are my movement behaviors or exercise behaviors and my eating behaviors supporting me? Are they supporting the life I want to live? Or are they taking away from that life? Am I able to live my life in line with my values? Am I able to attend or focus on other areas of my life? Or is there something going on that is taking away from that? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does, because it's more about, if people don't realize, but they do feel stressed or anxious when it comes to food. Maybe they don't have an eating disorder, like you said. It's two spectrums, but it is negatively impacting their life. So asking themselves these questions that you've just stated, I think, is a good way to kind of understand for them if they are maybe starting to go down the other way.
And also, thinking about, where are these behaviors coming from? Are they coming from some sort of external rules, diet culture, and so on? Are they coming from me trying to care for my body and respect my body and give my body what it actually needs? Excuse me. Or are they coming from some pressure that I'm feeling that I should be acting in a certain way? Are they coming from my desire to change my body, to punish my body? So it's sort of asking a little bit about the intent behind those behaviors. And I often talk about this because a behavior can look exactly the same for two people from the outside, right? But the intent behind it might either be a healthy one or an unhealthy one. So let's say we go out for dinner, right, with a friend, and we will choose the same dish. Let's do that usual chicken salad.
Okay.
We'll choose the chicken salad, but I might choose it because it's actually something I'm craving, want something light. It sounds good. Maybe the restaurant is known for that salad. And my friend chooses it because it's the least caloric thing on the menu, because she only allows herself to eat perfectly balanced meals. And because this might be the easiest thing on the menu that she can track afterwards. You can see that from the outside, it's exactly the same. We order the chicken salad and that's it. But the intention behind it is very different. So that's also a question to consider, where this behavior is coming from.
That is, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with exercise, isn't it? You've got people who are running because they enjoy going for a run, and then you've got people who are running like a lot because they think that it's going to help them achieve that body goal. Same thing with the gym as well. I think we as human beings have a bit of an obsessive nature with things, and we just need to know where to put our energy. I think majority people do have some sort of obsessive behaviors, and some of these behaviors can be good, but when it gets out of control, that's when the problem happens. And I think this is the thing. And again, like I said, with women in the age group of my listeners, whether it's the 30s or the 40s, I think diet culture is where a lot of beliefs come from, because from the conversations I have as well with the older clientele that I have, like I feel the early 30s and mid 30s, they're changing their minds about things a lot now. But the older clients, I have some clients in their 40s as well. Yeah. It's very hard to switch that off of, yes, I have a wedding coming up. I need to starve myself for 3 days or go on a juice detox for 3 days, because they did it for so many years. But that's what the magazines told us to do, right? You go online and you search a diet and you find all these juice detoxes before. And so these women have been practicing it for so long that they think that that's the easiest way to go. And no matter, how much you try to make them understand, they have an understanding, but it's this habit that just makes them feel comfortable to go back to every time they feel like, I need something quick.
Yeah, of course. That's the way we work. We like things that are familiar. We like to stay in the safe space because we've done this before. We can do it again. Yes, we can starve ourselves. It worked before, so it will work again. And it is very uncomfortable to try something different. And that's a lot of the times, that's where the support of a coach, or in general, like a community or even a friend, can make a big difference. Because I'm sure we might touch on self-compassion later on as well, but that's also something to consider when we're not yet able to offer ourselves compassion, offer ourselves that trust. Having someone in our corner who can do that, who can lend that trust to us, can be really powerful, so that we feel supported in a situation that is very unknown, very uncomfortable. Because for someone who has yo-yo dieted for the majority of their life, who has gone through restriction, guilt, overeating all over again, it is very difficult, very, very challenging to break that cycle, to try something different. And in those situations is really helpful to have that support system.
So having somebody like a friend or a coach by their side is going to make a big difference. However, again, we do see a lot of people who still hide away from these things, and they lie to themselves and they lie to other people. So as a coach, how do you help people unlearn their habits other than telling them, all right, you have my support, this is a community or whatever, friends, you have a friend, do this with a friend, your family. What are other ways that, or other tools that somebody could use that does not include someone else, to kind of unlearn these things? Because I personally really want to know the answer to this, because I do have certain clients that I find very, very difficult to get through to when it comes to this specific thing of unlearning these certain negative habits that they've been doing for so many years. And I don't know what tools to give them.
Yeah. So this is, let's take a more specific example of something that someone might be struggling with. Let's say someone is struggling with overeating in the evenings, right? And there are many tools they can use. One thing that I find super useful for many aspects of fitness, nutrition, but especially when it comes to overeating, emotional eating, having this urge to react in a certain moment, something I find super useful is just taking a 5-minute pause. And that pause can consist of various things, but it can simply just be you setting a timer on your phone for 5 minutes, doing something else. And then in that space, you can then choose, or after that time, you can choose something that is more helpful than reaching for food, for example. So this tool is something I use with clients a lot for different things. And when you're talking about breaking old habits, this can be super useful, because let's say you are triggered to engage in that old habit, whatever it is, whatever we're trying to break. If you allow yourself to break that space between, so from when you get the urge to do something in a certain way to actually doing it that way, to just allow yourself that little breathing space, 5 minutes. Now, you can do different things in those 5 minutes. This is just the main thing, just taking the pause. But imagine how much more aligned with how you want to feel you might be able to act if you give yourself that space. So, of course, this is not a thing of, I'll try this once and it's going to work and suddenly my life is changed and I'm never going to return to the old habit. No,
Yeah.
doesn't really work like that. But the more you practice giving yourself space, giving yourself those 5 minutes. And another thing, I think, the more you practice, basically, the easier it will become and more natural. Another thing also that I find useful is approaching these things with curiosity. Very often we jump to self-criticism, to judgment. I engaged in that, I don't know, let's say I overeat again. I overate again in the evening, and I told myself yesterday that tomorrow would be different, and I did it again. I will never change. I have no discipline. We often end up saying horrible things to ourselves,
Mhm.
but instead, maybe in those moments asking, what's happening? Why did I overeat? Not from a place of judgment, not from a place of why did I overeat? I need to figure this out. But like,
Mhm.
what happened? Did something lead me to overeat in the evening? Did I have regular balanced meals during the day? Was the overeating emotional eating? What happened? Right? I mean, even just changing the tone can help us bring more curiosity into this situation so that we act more from a place of self-compassion rather than self-criticism. Because we know that while self-criticism comes very naturally to probably the majority of us,
Mhm.
it doesn't actually help us change for the long term.
Yeah, that's true. Those are really great tools. Yeah, self criticism is something that is I think we all do it in some aspect or the other of our lives, you know, and we have to become aware of it because we are I think a lot of us tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves, whether it comes to your job, whether it comes to your nutrition, whether it comes to your fitness, and in the end we just make ourselves feel bad. So I think it's super important for people to try and recognize what the trigger is rather than making themselves feel bad about what's just happened, because identifying the trigger will then eventually help them identify the root of it, and then the behavior change can come into place. Yeah, I was using the 5 minute tool with some
Yeah.
of my clients already. It works great.
Nice. Yeah.
So for women who come for fat loss, they also have fitness goals, obviously. So they want to pursue fat loss, but then they also want to pursue body acceptance. How are those two able to be combined together without actually adding conflict when we're trying to teach them the basics of nutrition and also telling them that they need to move their body more, they need to lift more, they need to get more steps in, and then also trying to make them understand that they need to accept their bodies.
This is an interesting question. And one thing I would challenge first would be the language around it. We don't need to do anything. We get to move our bodies. We get to choose nutritious foods. And that can already be a powerful shift, right? But in terms of pursuing fat loss, it's really important to consider this is where this desire is coming from, because usually people don't just want fat loss. They want something that fat loss represents. And we can usually get that without focusing solely on that number on the scale or on the measurements of our bodies. So when we talk about how body image, fat loss, fitness goals go together, body image is about how we relate to our bodies, and it's about how we take care of our bodies. So naturally, when we have a positive body image, we take better care of our bodies because when we hate something, we tend to not take very good care of it, right? So when I am in a constant battle with my body, in a constant battle with the scale, it is very likely that I will not be taking good care of my body. I'll probably restrict food. Let's say I wake up in the morning, I see the number on the scale. I'm not happy with that. I might skip breakfast. I might ignore my hunger cues when the time comes for lunch. I might go out or go to the gym and do hours of cardio because I will be so focused on that number on the scale. If we look at that from a positive body image perspective, right? And this is, I really want to say it clearly that when we talk about positive body image, this is not about loving your body. It is not about loving every single part of your body every single day. It's simply about treating our bodies with care and with respect. And for someone who then has a positive body image, they might wake up. They might be able to then say, let's say they weigh themselves and they see a number on the scale that is higher than the previous day, but they don't attach any meaning to it. They say, okay, I know this can be lower or higher because of different things, but I'm going to move on with my day. I'm going to choose a nutritious breakfast because I know this is what's going to set me up to have enough energy throughout the day. And I know that my body needs some fuel in the mornings. And they will go on with their day. They will eat when they feel hungry for lunch. Maybe they'll go to the gym in the afternoon because that's just something they have grown to enjoy. And all these behaviors might in the end lead to fat loss. But our focus was not fat loss. Our focus was respecting and appreciating our body, treating it with care. And naturally, when we do that, we also need to consider nutrition, of course. This is the basis. We can't really talk about health without talking about having an overall balanced diet that helps us feel our best. And it just so happens that what helps us feel our best is overall having mostly balanced meals, mostly relying on, nutritious choices, not overly processed foods. But we're talking about mostly, right? There is still space for flexibility and there's still space for including all of the things that we enjoy in our overall diet.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about if we hate our body, or sorry, if we hate something, we don't take care of it. So in the same way, if somebody is doing something excessive, skipping breakfast and, with all that focus, in reality, they are not doing themselves a service. It's technically they hate themselves, as bad as it sounds to say that out loud. It is, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, actually. I haven't actually thought about it that way, and it's a good way to put it out, because so many people do that, and they tell themselves they're doing it because they love themselves and they want to feel better, but in reality, they're hurting themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the thing is that when we try to change from a place of hate or a place of judgment, of criticism, that change is not going to last long. We might be able to keep it up for some time, but it's not coming from a place where we feel good about what we're doing. If we go to the gym because it's our way of punishing ourselves for something we ate, it will be very, very difficult for us to enjoy moving our body. So shifting that focus from I do exercise because, or I exercise because I need to change my body, or because I ate something yesterday, or I want to control how my body looks, to I exercise because it makes me feel great, because it gives me energy, because I get mental health benefits, all of these things. And of course, this is not, again, it's not an overnight shift, right? We might very likely will have to do some deeper work and some digging to get to that place. And we might have to forget about certain habits, certain behaviors, and introduce new ones. And yeah, we might realize that actually I hate running. Why would I ever do that? But I love swimming. So then we might do something different. It's about allowing ourselves that freedom to explore what we actually want to do and what we might like to introduce into our lives, that's something different that we haven't considered before, but that might make us feel better than all those rules that we have created for ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big advocate of do the things you like, follow having healthy, balanced meals, get movement, do all the basics and take your focus away from the scale. And then you'll just start to see the body is going to come with it. I mean, that's what happened for me when I stopped, focusing on getting that six pack and everything. And I just, movement became a way of life. The way I ate just became a way of life. And then one day I just look in the mirror and I go, wow, when did this happen? Not even registering because I'm not checking. So I think for me that was the biggest win in this entire fitness journey that I started, having that moment where it just happened and I was no longer obsessed and looking at my stomach and thinking, oh, what is this? When is this going to go away? Just nope. Fitness is a lifestyle and it comes with it. And I also think a lot of people don't realize that it takes a long time. If you want to achieve a specific body goal, it's not a 3 month thing. Okay, coaches do 3 month programs, but you're not going to get the body in the 3 months. We give you those programs so that you can learn to build those habits, and we can help you understand where you need to make changes and how to train and how to move your body. And then you got to pursue this on your own for years until you can actually achieve what you think you can achieve in 3 months. And I think this is where people tend to fall back and forth, always yo-yoing, because their expectation is like something super quick. If I start looking back at my own progress from the beginning of when I started training and I start going backwards, it was so different at every single phase. And I stopped having body goals a very long time ago. But even after that, my body changed very, very much all throughout without having that as a goal. And it took a very long time for me to finally say, yes, this is actually the fittest I've ever looked. You see, fittest I've ever felt, yes, but fittest I've ever looked. It took years to get to that point, and I think people don't realize that.
Yeah. And I think also we need to consider what that goal represents, right? And I think for a lot of people, like I said earlier, it's not about the actual body, how that body looks, but it's what that represents. And for a lot of my clients, they simply just want to feel confident in their bodies. And the interesting thing is, confidence doesn't come from changing our bodies. It comes from changing how we relate to our bodies. It comes from what we were saying earlier. It comes from us deciding, okay, how would I act in this moment if I truly honored and respected my body? What would that look like? It comes from changing that. It comes from changing those behaviors, right? That's where confidence is not about, it's not where we finally see a six pack. We both know that it's not there. But now maybe also the audience will think about feeling confident in their body in a different way that isn't connected to how you look physically.
Yeah. I mean, this whole skinny thing, skinny is the way to go, and skinny is what's going to make you give you happiness, and all of that is such a toxic thing that we as a society are stuck with. It's so toxic, but we're trying to deal with it, but it's a very toxic thing, and it's really sad that there's so many women out there. I think obviously women are more affected with this than men. You can correct me if I'm wrong, if you work with any men, but I think women are more affected than men with this, and it's very easy for us to always compare ourselves to other people and then feel shitty about our bodies. But I've also seen women who are not skinny who have personalities with so much confidence, and they come across as just these amazing women who love their bodies.
It does speak to the point of confidence doesn't come from how you look, right? So
It
I think
doesn't.
that's the point you were trying to make.
There's so many people out there who have a lot of confidence, and I don't think it comes from being skinny. That's just what I think. And it's sad that our society has this, our generation, our society, actually, it's not even our generation, it's even the generation before us, and now even the generation after us, that has this toxic culture. And then they go, was it strong is the new skinny? Now, the fact that they even had to make that slogan to say strong is the new skinny, which means skinny was awesome. Now let's become strong.
But that also comes with issues, right?
Of course. I think all of it
now,
does.
like we were saying, yeah, now having this obsession around gaining muscle, obsession about having your protein, because otherwise the world's going to end. We are also moving from that flourishing health we spoke about at the beginning of the episode. So I think importantly, when it comes to the influences, the outside influences, social media, diet culture, all of these things, we need to take some responsibility for what we feed our brains with. And not to sound harsh or anything when I talk about taking some responsibility, but we do have the ability to create our social feeds to or curate to a certain up to a certain level. We can surround ourselves with influences that, like, whether that's social media or other or TV shows, whatever it is, that make us feel good about ourselves. And we can actively unfollow those accounts that don't make us feel great. So yes, there is a huge issue that we have where things that are still being promoted are incredibly harmful. But the good news is that we do have some, I guess, control over what we see, at least on our social media feeds.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I want to come down to a little bit about the nutrition aspect of things. What are your thoughts on intuitive eating for somebody who spent years tracking? Because I see a lot of people, well, not for somebody who spent, both for somebody who spent years tracking and somebody who hasn't tracked that.
Yeah. So I like to use some principles of intuitive eating in my coaching. I think some of it is useful. On the other hand, I like to think about more in intentional eating, right? And especially for someone who has maybe spent years tracking, going from that to intuitive eating can even just sound impossible. And it often is in practice as well very, very difficult. So there's no need to go from tracking straight to intuitive eating. What I try to do when I have clients who have tracked for a long time and have realized that it's taking away from enjoying food, it's taking away from the quality of their lives. We work on slowly removing tracking. That might look like not tracking one meal a week. That's realistically how for some clients it starts. And then when they prove to themselves that nothing happens, they are still okay. And in any case, for some time at the beginning, they'll be still tracking in their head, even if not on the app. And that's okay. It's also okay to focus on the meals that you're familiar with, that you kind of already know the macros for, but not track them. That's the first step. And we'll slowly transition. And the important thing here is not to go from structure to no structure. I like to promote, having some sort of an idea of what you will be eating when, because that helps us, it helps us plan. And yes, I don't want to promote here that eating balanced meals come just intuitively. Not always it doesn't. So I like to have some structure, but I do like things from intuitive eating, especially when it comes to allowing yourself or giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. And this is very important for a lot of my clients, to bring back the foods that they used to enjoy but haven't let themselves have in a long time. Some aspects of intuitive eating are very useful and I do use them, but at the same time, I like to introduce some structure when we're working on, overall well-being of my clients.
So what I'm getting from this is majority of your clients, obviously, then they are people who have been tracking their foods and they have obsessive behaviors and things like that. What about intuitive eating for people who have are just starting off? They have no they don't know how to track or anything like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So throughout my years of coaching, I've done tracking with some clients. I've done intuitive, I say adapted intuitive eating with others. And I've come to realize that most people don't need tracking at all. That doesn't mean, that they don't need structure. So the answer is very similar for someone who, and maybe even more so, for someone who's never tracked and has no idea about what a balanced meal even looks like. In that case, having structure is going to be even more important, because for someone that comes from years of tracking, they have trained themselves to have some structure already. So for them, it will be more of a challenge to go away from that, right? To go away from
Yeah.
having too much structure. Whereas for someone who doesn't have any idea, it might be very helpful to introduce some structure. I don't think that needs to be done through tracking. I think that can be simply done through introducing the balanced plate method so that people understand how a balanced plate looks like, what it consists of, introducing regular meal times, introducing sitting down at your table when you're eating. These sort of tools that are really not about numbers. They're not about necessarily the ins and outs of nutrition or of nutrition science, but they are tools that can help someone who's never really thought about having a balanced diet, or hasn't really thought about their nutrition. These things can help them to bring some structure into their days, so they can then make some choices intuitively easier, I guess.
Yeah, because I agree with you definitely. Because I've had new people, for example, be like, "Yeah, I intuitively eat," and I'm like, "All right, have you ever tracked in the past?" And then they say, "No." My personal belief, and you can correct me if you're wrong, I think if you've never tracked your if you've never tracked your food before, you've never tracked your macros, your protein, your carbs, your fat ever in your life, I don't think it's possible for you to intuitively eat because you don't know how much of what is actually in the foods that you're consuming. This is
Hmm.
the way I see it.
Yeah.
Because then, you have people, if you know how much protein, fats, and carbs are in specific meals, then you know what a nutritionally dense meal is and what a non nutritionally dense meal is, right? Whereas somebody
Hmm.
who doesn't have that understanding, when they go to intuitively eat, they may think that they are not eating very much because they're eating tiny snacks here and there, but actually they're not nutritionally dense and they're very high in calories. So personally, I do the stuff you do with most of the beginners, like with the balanced plate method and sitting down to eat. But then the next level I go to is coming to tracking, even if it's just for a short time, for them to understand what is in their food, not to track obsessively to, unless there's a specific goal,
Yeah.
which normally, if like when it comes to building muscle, that's when we have to go into that. But majority of my clients come for fat loss. So we don't really have to focus too much on that for a long period of time. And nobody can keep it up for a long period
Yeah.
of time because usually these women that come for fat loss, they are already in and out without structure. They're trying to find their ground and trying to find time to do these things. So it's not like they track consistently either, but it then gives them the idea of, wow, you gave me these many calories to eat and I've already finished it by midday, but I'm still hungry because I didn't really eat any meals, you know? So
Hmm.
this is the reason why
Yeah.
I like doing it for a short time.
Yeah, I think it can be useful for a short period of time. I would say, and I'm sure you will agree with that, it really depends on each client. For
100%.
someone, like we were saying before, right? It's the intention behind the behavior. And with my clients who are highly perfectionistic, who are very self-critical, and who come from a background of disordered eating and struggling with food, tracking would mean, or having them track would mean me not having their best interest at heart. So it really, that's why we always say in coaching, like, we meet the client where they are and we work with each individual. So we can't say, that's why often we'll say things like, well, it depends, because there's no one answer for every single for all of us, right? There's no generalization. I can't pronounce this word. You can't generalize it when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to our well-being. It's each individual. So yeah, for
Yeah.
someone, tracking might be like, oh, cool. Let me take it as an informative challenge and let's see what I'm eating. For someone, that very same behavior might lead to them having an even worse relationship with food than they had in the first place. So yeah, again, it depends.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of it depends. Like when I initially speak to clients on a discovery call, they ask a lot of questions of, so how are we going to do this? And there's a lot of things that I say it depends, because it's going to be unique to you. Once you fill out the form, once we start working together, every week we're going to learn something. I'm going to learn something about you. So it depends. I can't tell you this is exactly how we're going to do it. It doesn't work. Even with the gym, to be honest, it doesn't always work the same way, because yeah, program structures can be similar, but your lifestyle, do you have enough time? Are you going to the gym? Do you have a stressful job? Are you still breastfeeding? Things are going to change all the time. And so it depends. Everybody is so unique. And this is a thing that people go online to look for the answer, but there's not one answer.
There is not one answer. No, it really, yeah, it just doesn't exist. But I mean, for us coaches, I feel that's the beauty of coaching. That's the beauty of working with many different people and seeing how different strategies, different tools work for different people. And there's always something new happening. And I think that's what makes this work so rewarding.
Yeah, I totally enjoy it. I love it. So you talk about helping people live a life aligned with what truly matters to them, right? This is what you based your coaching on. So what does that
Mhm.
process look like?
Yeah, so that's one of the steps in the coaching process. Again, it will depend on the client, but for sure, one of the first steps we'll go through is understanding their values. So they'll get a worksheet where they go through this process of thinking about what truly matters to them, what their core values are in life, what they want to stand for. So we're not talking about goals yet. So values are different from goals. Values are sort of the direction we want to go in life, um, and who we want to be as a person. So we look at that, and when their values are clear, usually what it happens is they realize that that there's some discrepancy between what they say or they even feel is important to them and the things they do in their lives, right? So then we try to close this discrepancy or bridge this gap. We then set some goals that are in line with those values that they want to stand for in life. And that informs our coaching process. So then we'll do more of the things that help them live a life that's aligned with those values. And we'll move away from the things that don't help them live that fulfilling life.
Nice. So we've kind of come full circle where you said, people like there's another reason for why they do what they do. And so the first step is finding that. That's really great. Yeah. Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so I want to come to a couple of tips that you could give the audience. What are three things that somebody can start doing today to improve their relationship with their
Nice. I mean, a loaded question, of course. I have noticed that you like loaded questions. The number one thing I would say is sit down with a journal Well, it doesn't need to be a fancy journal, please. No one think that. It can just be a piece of paper and a pen. And just answer these two questions. Number one would be, what sort of things would I do if I truly honored and respected my body? And what sort of things would I not do if I truly honored and respected my body? This would be the number one thing that, of course, can't stay just there. So we can move to the tool, to tip number two. Once you have written those down, choose one of the things from your more of, or what kind of things would you do if you respected your body? Choose one of those things, or, choose one that you maybe have been doing, but not enough. Something that is easy to start. So after those two questions, you can also ask yourself, what do I want to do more of and what do I want to do less of? And then choose one of the things. And then just plan for how, when you'll do it, and start small. I'm sure this is something that comes up with your clients all the time. We tend to set ourselves goals that are just so big, and then we don't follow through, not because we're failures, but because the goals were too big in the first place. So I encourage you to start super small, maybe even smaller than you think is small. Start tiny, and you can always build on that.
Yeah, I love those.
And then I think the third one I would say would be, think about, I'm going to return back to the main, or sort of something that I do in coaching, because I think it's super valuable and it's something that has changed my own relationship with my body. And it's about getting clear on your values. So we've spoken a little bit about that. So the audience, you'll already know what we're referring to, but understanding what it is that is important for you, for the way you want to live your life. And this is especially important if the body and food thoughts are sort of constant and they've become a big part of your life. It's important to then take that pause, take that step of understanding where you want your life to go from now on. What do you want to stand for? What are your 3 to 5 core values? And what can you do, like practical stuff, little things, little actions that you can do to start living in line with those values?
Great. Awesome. So, one last question for you before we tune off today. If a listener right now is struggling, maybe feeling a bit frustrated with be their relationship with food, or stuck in these old habits that they really want to work on getting over, what would you want them to know? A message for them?
Ooh, I became a bit emotional.
Yeah.
I want you to know that you are not alone, that you are not broken, nothing is wrong with you, and change is possible. And I know that this is something that's thrown around a lot, but you truly are capable of changing how you feel about your body, and you really are more than capable of finding freedom and more peace around food. You very likely just haven't found the approach that works for you. But with some of the steps that we've talked about today, you can maybe just experiment, allow yourself to try a couple of the tools that we've talked about today, and just see what happens.
That's really great. Yeah, I think this topic is it is quite an emotional topic, especially if you have dealt with it in the core, in your heart, and you've struggled deeply with it. And it's something hard, and I think people, once they come out of the hole that they're in, because it is the cycle that they're going into, I think the freedom that they feel after is something beautiful. So it's really amazing that this is what you are doing, and that is your focus with your nutrition coaching. And I really appreciate you, and I'm sure everybody appreciates all your clients appreciate you being there for them, because it's something hard. It's something hard for people to admit to. It's something hard for people to open up to as well. And so having somebody qualified like you to work with not only the this is what you have to eat part, but also let's fix how you feel about yourself. You are beautiful. Don't put yourself down is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to understand that our behaviors are not random.
Right.
Our habits are not random. They happen because of some sort of trigger or something else that's going on. So our job is to approach these things with curiosity and understand what's going on for these behaviors to happen. They're likely serving some sort of a unmet need or something that we're struggling with. And when we're able to understand that, that's when we can move in the direction of a more lasting change and away from constantly battling with our bodies.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. One last question for you. Where can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
Sure. So I am active on Instagram. You can find me there at Coach Barbara Vode. Maybe we can leave that in the episode notes.
I'll put it down in the notes for sure.
Perfect. And yeah, all the details are there. And I hope you found something helpful in the episode. It was my pleasure to be here with you and share this conversation.
Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation. I did learn a lot, that's for sure, and I'm sure people listening have resonated and related to what we've talked about today. Thank you so much. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining this week's episode of It's Pretty Simple. If you like this episode, please make sure to hit like if you thought that this episode was helpful, or you have a friend or family member who you think is struggling with something like this. Please make sure to share this episode with them. And I will see you guys next week. Take care, stay strong, stay safe, and eat well.